For the record, I would like to say I was not asleep. I'm like a coiled spring just waiting to pounce. Right. So one or two of you may have seen something like this before. We said at Highways UK we were going to start an initiative over the course of this year called Roads to Tomorrow. Mostly because all the other good names involving digital and roads have already been taken, and it's quite hard to find a new one. But the principle of this is something that we've been feeling in our hearts in DFT, and particularly in traffic and technology, for a number of years, which is that we kind of have a bit of a futures problem. So back before I came to DFT, I'm a transport historian by training. I used to do stuff particularly about road building in the mid-20th century and how people tried to go and deal with congestion. But generally, you look back at the history of transport, and lots of people are always talking about the future. It's going to be a bright and shiny future. It's going to look a bit like this, basically. It's going to be sleek. It's going to be modern. There are no problems in here. You have lines and boxes doing things that you can't currently do right now. 2050 in transport right now always looks amazing. I'm really looking forward to seeing 2050. But 2025 is probably going to look a lot like that. I think is that Luton? I think that's Luton. Anyway, the principle of it is that we have a shiny future, but tomorrow looks a lot like today. And I hate to break it to you, 2050 is probably going to be that plus another 25 at the same. I bet you can come back to that street on whatever the equivalent of Google Street View is going to be in that year. And the main difference will be the quality of the camera that's looking at it, rather than where the street's going to be, or even the things like the lines or the signs or anything else like that. The future is going to look very similar to the present, unless we figure out how to go and do something about it. So change is possible, but we always kind of find it quite slippery to get a hold of. We don't make the changes we kind of imagine are going to come to us. And it's giving us a kind of a philosophical paradox in all this, and we want to figure out how to unlock that potential. Now, there are reasons for this. It's the reason that the future is hard to get a hold of is very understandable. I probably don't need to sell to you the idea technology can do something of value in all of this system. But if you look back at various people trying various things, pictures of monorails speeding down the streets of Leicester near here, back in the 1960s when Konrad Smigelski was the guy who was their big future guru here for transport in Britain. Plans for big flyovers and ring roads and what have you. Why that all never came to pass, there are a number of reasons why you might find it difficult to get from where we are around to where you might imagine yourself going to be in the future. And it applies just as much to what was happening then as to what's happening now. 2050 is a very easy year to change when you think about it, because 2050 is just a picture on a page. It's some drawings, it's some words. If you want to go and change what 2050 looks like, it's easy. Get out of rubber. If you want to change what 2025 looks like, you've got to get out a spade and you've got to get some guys with some serious muscle behind them to go and start to dig up some road or change some signs or do something real and impactful. And that's much harder because people are going to go and fight back. Change the future, no one's going to fuss half as much as if you're going to go in and suddenly put a new residence parking restriction in on their street, he says with feeling. And if you want to go and dig back some of the challenges around that, we find it very hard to go and get ourselves into a world of making that future compared to where we are in, say, for example, managing the roads of today. We talk a lot about digital roads, and for good reason. There's lots of potential in digital roads. But we don't spend half as much time asking ourselves, how does a digital road relate to an analog road? And if you think about it, analog roads are a really serious piece of work. It took us generations to build the road network we have around us right now. To go and shift that analog road network is really hard. The analog road network isn't just a matter of some physical assets or a thing that tends to get priority in budget discussions because you get it wrong, it's going to kill somebody. It's also a whole series of assumptions and ways of doing business and things in our heads. The road network that we built since about 1930 in terms of legislation and regulation and everything, it doesn't just run on the highways outside, it runs through our heads just as much. We think about roads in a way that is conditioned by assumptions that go back to the era of Morris Minors, and we haven't really challenged very much. We find it quite hard to get out of it sometimes. And that's what we're trying to go and do something about here with what we're doing here in this piece of work. So we have come up with a scheme which we call Roads to Tomorrow. And hopefully this is going to work. There we go. Which we describe as unlocking the potential of technology on roads by unblocking the people that make it happen. We don't want to just go and repeat all those shiny projects that we tend to have in the past from DFT of coming in and saying, we have a strategy, look, it's amazing, it's got colours, it's got objectives, and it's got priorities, objectives and priorities, how can it go wrong? We are looking to try and make something that's a bit more listening in terms of what it does, because we recognise that transport really in the real world, that 2025 street, isn't designed in terms of some big picture from the ivory tower. It's something which is done street by street, decision by decision, day by day, by people like us, all of us individually, not working as one great big centrally organized apparatus, but as individuals making decisions in the here and now, which are going to be conditioned by what you think of as priorities and what your users and your client bases are asking you to think about. And that's, I think, quite different and quite challenging for us up in the ivory tower, because we love thinking it's so simple you can have it on one diagram. We like to think it's all about building an architecture rather than surviving a jungle. When I talk about this project, I tend to say we're not the first people to go and think about this. I got this job because I volunteered to clamber over the bodies of my predecessors to go and make sure that we could actually come up with a new strategy that might do things a little bit differently. And I wanted to highlight 3 things today, which I think are going to hopefully make this a little bit different from what we've done in the past. Before I get into those 3, I should apologise, because really we should be telling you right now about what we have achieved in the past 6 months. We started very well in October, had a couple of workshops with local authorities. We had to pause a few things because we got the money for traffic signals. We've been doing a lot on the national parking platform. We just found ourselves having to go and pick our fights, and we think that this is something that's really worth giving some serious digestion and time to, and giving a chance to really give people an opportunity to have their say in relation to it. I want to come back to that theme in a moment. But yes, so we have 3 things, which helps if the slide works. There we go. Thing number 1, we recognize this is decentralized. This is not about having one view of the picture and saying this is the right view. Everybody in that chart, and I'm not going to run through them one by one, has their own perspective on what's happening on the roads as technology comes forward. Each one has their own incentives, their own aims, their own thoughts, their own perspective. I had a really useful conversation, which is a bit of a sort of a light bulb moment for me, talking with some guys from Waymo, the self-driving people at Google, about their trial in Phoenix when they were doing the first robotaxi service in the world. And they were describing something which was, in technical terms, incredibly cutting edge, incredibly sophisticated. You know, they were getting a vehicle to drive itself. And I've been watching their videos for years and thinking, yeah, where are you faking this? Where are you doing this? Where's the camera cut gone? But actually, no, they were doing the things that now are starting to roll out into more US streets and more Chinese streets as well. And they were describing things that I would have thought was impossible from my world. And then they described the things they couldn't do. And I thought, but that's trivial, surely. I mean, we could do that with 6 months of coordinated work, no bother at all. These self-driving cars, marvellous pieces of the most sophisticated transport things in the world. If they get stopped by a policeman in Phoenix, they will speak through a microphone and they will say, please look under the driver's sun visor. And inside you pop it down and there'll be a paper driving license. Now, that's just insane. How can you not have that side digitized and yet have the vehicle driving itself? Well, that's the real world we work in. If you actually talk to self-driving car makers, the thing they will say is they don't want some special, spectacular road network built just for them, but they would really like us to get our TROs in a digital format that they can read. That's the thing that makes the UK interesting to them, because it's a step above what most people in the world are able to do, especially if you're working in the US, where goodness knows they have a way to go in even catching up with us. The other thing to bear in mind in relation to this chart is there is an elephant in the room, which we are also very alert to. However much we like to have our conversations in amongst those little boxes, the users are the ones who define the pace around all of this. I used to run the road investment strategy. We had a budget of about £5.5–6 billion a year. That's a lot of money. But users every year spend about £60 to £70 billion being on the roads. Nobody is setting the pace of the technology coming onto this network other than them. And they don't wait for us to come up with a policy document. They don't wait for us to go and consult them. If I want to go and get something new in a new car, I just go out and I buy it. And unless someone stopped me doing it, that's the story changing around us without us being involved. So we have to listen to what's going on around us far more than we dictate. Second point. Technology is just about gadgets. There's a vision of technology being some rangy-haired individual jumping out of a bath and screaming, "Eureka! I've got it." That is not how technology, I think, really works in practice. It is not about waiting for some genius to show up from Silicon Valley to go and make things work for you. As I said, I did a lot of stuff on history of technology back in the day, and you could break this down into a number of different steps. I like these 5 that I've got on the slide just here. Others have other ways of doing it. But to get to something which is going to change how the world is working, you need to put together a lot of different things and create a system which is partly about that moment of genius, but is mostly about human beings doing things in slightly different ways and mobilizing a whole variety of interconnected things to make things happen. Equipment and data. There is stuff that you have out there as kit that does things, that changes sometimes. Technical functionality, what that data, that kit then ties together to go and be able to say, that's a separate step in the process. Someone needs to use that thing, someone has to want to pick it up and make it a worthwhile service to deliver. Someone needs to pay for it, and somebody needs to be able to use it as an operator or as someone delivering that service. Now, within those 5 steps, I'd say the one on the left is very much about that moment of genius. The stuff about technical functionality is about the patient work of saying, well, if I can do this and I can do this, I can stick them together and then I'll do that, which I think is arguably the more determined and clever thing to be doing. And we're getting some real progress on some of these areas. So I would say we're getting much better at the equipment and data. There's lots of stuff out there now. The world is changing around us. The technical functionality, we can deliver it. Some of the stuff you're seeing up here is people saying, I could make that happen now. I don't need to wait. I don't need for anybody to come and give me a manual. I'll just bring it to you. And well, I'd be a little bit cautious about saying this. I think we're getting better at money and people. And no one feels they have enough money. Everyone's constantly looking for resources. But money-wise, we are getting more cash into these questions from central government point of view than I think we ever had before. I think the £70 million for traffic signals is a really good indication. That was, I think I'm right in saying, the biggest amount of new money the department got for roads last year. That doesn't happen normally. We don't normally have, as happened at Highways UK. Emma Ward, our Director General, standing up and leading with that as being the sort of thing that we're doing in DFT to go and make the roads work better. And people, I mean, we've got Chris from West Midlands. We've got many people from West Midlands here actually today, but Chris is coordinating our effort on the ITS World Congress in 2027, coming to down the road at the NEC, as everything in life does, but indicating that I think the West Midlands is seen as being globally as up there with the best. And I don't think that the West Midlands is unique in that either in terms of the UK. There are a number of authorities that are doing work which, however stressed you may feel and however short of resources you may feel at the critical moment, still looks pretty shiny by global standards. So we have some work we can do here that will be effective. But if I want to say there's a gap in this chain, I'd probably say it's around the middle bit, the willing users. About getting from a world in which you can do something because the kit is there, you can do something because someone's stuck it together, but somebody doesn't quite feel like they're able to take that opportunity and use it. We've got this back a lot from our early engagement with local authorities. There's potential, but what do I do about it? There's too much of it. It's a snowstorm. I can't see my way through all of this stuff. And actually building that sense of there being a market that wants to go and take advantage of what's available now, that may be one of our biggest gaps right now. And we in DFT have some potential to try and shift that, I think, and something we want to go and do something with as part of this initiative. Third area, genuinely adding value to the transport mix. Now, I've heard lots of things over the years about, you could do this fantastic thing with technology. I love traffic signs because I couldn't write the business case for going and installing traffic signs across the UK right now. If it was a first principles thing. This was done a good 100 years ago originally. But the idea of sinking a lot of metal poles into the side of the road, sticking a plate on it with some random hieroglyph that you find by getting a manual and reading through it to find out, oh, that thing means no horses. Oh, good, glad to know. That would be very hard to justify. You'd be putting a lot of risk on the road network, it'd cost a lot of money, and there'd be a huge maintenance bill associated with it. I probably couldn't get it past Treasury. But I also, this year, couldn't possibly get the business case past them to tear it up and replace it with a modern digital method of communication, which would be the natural thing to go to nowadays. We are used to those signs. It's the vehicles that are driving up using those terribly sophisticated automated technologies, they are reading the same signs. They're not using a digital database. They're looking at it and saying what it says. I don't need to tell you what that bar on a circle means. It's wired into your brain and has been since you probably were a toddler. Tearing that up would be impossible, just as much as putting it in for the first time would be now. So instead, we need to look at new ways of making the value in this space. I think there are three angles which I'm really excited about in looking at this. First of all, our user base has moved on. If you came to intelligent transport systems or similar 20 years ago, like I did, you are thinking of a world where this is happening in the future. Steve, you were telling me about the time you went down to the with the minister back in your early career to the TRL test track in Bracknell, and coming back with a sense of there's something that could be done here. about vehicles having screens in them. Well, now every vehicle coming onto the market pretty much has a screen in it. And this is a humongous opportunity to communicate to motorists we never had before, and motorists are probably looking to us to do something in this space. But in DFT, we don't actually have somebody whose job it is to go and make that communication happen. I don't know which would be more surprising to the people of that trip, Steve, either that we would be in a position of having screens in millions of vehicles, or the fact we'd have no one doing anything about it on a national level. I think probably the second would have blown their minds more than the first, because they would have assumed that's a huge investment. There are things we can do on the back of that new expectation on users, on the back of the idea that people want something more out of their vehicles, which will sell politically, economically, and where we can do something useful about this. The National Parking Platform was my go-to for this because we found, when we announced it, gosh, there's a lot of people who want to use this now. Secondly, we can do things better than we ever have done before. Vehicle electrification, for example, you couldn't do that without the changes in battery technology that are out there. We will decarbonise at least the tailpipe in a serious way over the next 20 years on the back of technology. That's one everyone knows about, but equally, everyone's now carrying around one of these, which broadcasts a signal. There are things you can do to go and tell people, there's a mobile phone here. A car could see that. If a car sees that, we can do things to stop them hitting cyclists or pedestrians that wouldn't have been possible before. I think Vision Zero runs through this thing in my pocket, as well as through intelligent people on boards. And we also can get value out of things that we already do, but by doing it ever so slightly smarter. DTROs is a lovely example. By doing the thing we already do in a similar way, we can unlock a whole heap of value that will do our jobs for us down the line, which means we will get impact by being ourselves, but being ourselves in a slightly more rigorous way. Those sorts of things are not duplicating what the existing road network does. They are doing something new and better and different, and that, I think, is where our business cases for the future might lie. We also want to simplify things while we're here. So DFT, I think, has many, many strategies about many, many things. It will really help us, purely in traffic and technology, purely in the roads tech world, to think about what the 5 things are we should be concentrating on. Because there's 1,000 things we could do, but it would be really good for us to understand what 5 things might make a difference in the next year, 2 years, 3 years. Where could we really be investing our time in building bridges or making connections or whatever? These are suggestions that are not from DFT, by the way. They are all from stakeholders. Don't read anything into the choices that are up there. But I love an idea of a top 5, and I love encouraging others to have a top 5 too. I don't think it's reasonable to ask our local authorities to figure out what in the whole world of technology should I be thinking about. But I think it's very reasonable to go and say, which of these 5 do you think should be the thing you're spending your time on? If we can clarify and simplify, I think we'll move faster collectively as a profession. What actually is Roads to Tomorrow? Well, we've got 4 things in here which we tend to talk about. This isn't a listening exercise, but it is something that has a lot of listening in it. We're going to be doing a lot of engagement sessions. We did a few with local authorities up in the north late last year. We'll be doing more, hopefully, down in the south this year. And we're also going to be reaching out to the sector in a number of different ways, whether you're in the consulting end of it, whether you're in the operational end of it, whether you're in a highway operator that isn't one of the local authorities we've been talking to. We want to hear points of view because we can build that more sophisticated picture. Secondly, we want to clarify what's going on. We want to write down on a piece of paper sort of what the exam question is so that you don't feel like you're flying alone. If you're bringing this into a committee for investment, or you're having a conversation with somebody about how this should be a priority in your area. And we like what Gear Change did for cycling a couple of years back. We want to try and do something on that kind of level. Not a massive, great, thick white paper that you can go and use to fend off any bandits or squash any flies near to you. We want something that's going to be a bit leaner and a bit more presentation friendly, that someone can pick up and read. And if they're not an expert in the field, feel enthused about what we're doing in this space. Again, the fact that we're doing this in a politically febrile time may not be coincidence. Thirdly, we want to act. We don't want to do stuff on the back of this. We want to make sure that we walk out of this with a set of business cases or priorities that we can use in DFT and elsewhere so that people can actually see some action on the ground. And 2025 looks slightly different to what it is in 2024. And lastly, we want to help people to connect. We want to try and find those opportunities for the overlap between worlds to fix one problem with another person's solution, and find the answers that lie between our different worlds, of which I suspect there are far more than we give ourselves credit for. And particularly for a local authority point of view, you'd be amazed how many people's problems you could solve and do something special in your area with just a little bit of reaching outwards. And we want to make that as easy as we can do on the back of this work. Anyway, our target for this is to get that document out in 2025, ideally the early half of it, but political climate, who knows quite. But the idea is something that's going to be, again, here and usable and hopefully able to help make your world that little bit easier. Thank you very much for your time.